All right, 2026 first episode, Jan 8th. Welcome back to GTMN.fm. And we are starting with AV trouble. So we started recording
Or
like 5
Riverside
minutes ago.
trouble, or
Or
AWS,
Riverside trouble.
one of the three.
One of the three, but it took us like 5 minutes to get going here this morning. So you didn't hear any of it, but thought it would make sense to talk about it.
That was really fun.
Safari and Riverside are not cooperating. So it might be feedback for the Riverside team if anyone's listening to this one.
Maybe we should just
Go,
record our AV trouble next time as part of
we
it.
will. All right, 2026, Jan 8th, lots to cover from the last couple of weeks. We took some time off during the holidays. I went skiing. Austin, what did you do? You ran a lot. That's what I heard.
I ran a bunch. I actually had my biggest mileage week ever at the end of the
Oh
year.
my God.
Crazy.
That's amazing. Before the new year starts. I love it. I love it.
It was not
And yes,
it was just one of those things. I went out and I ran a bunch by Wednesday, and then I ran a bunch when I came back after Wednesday. And just like, okay, I guess this works.
fantastic. I signed up for that half marathon. So I think it's called, I forget the name of it every time, but like it's in San Luis Obispo. One of my colleagues recommended because it has a downhill grade. So November 13th, I'm going to be running a half marathon after like a decade and a half. Like I ran one when I was 25 and have never done it since. So it's
We're
going to
doing
be
it
fun.
together. Team Paramark and GTM FM.
There we go. All right, we are. Okay, lots going on in 2026. Austin, I want to kick off with this whole, my feed has been full of, and it's, I think it's also because it's CES week. Everyone is at CES literally right now, but it's all about agentic commerce. And one of the headlines from the last couple of weeks was, do you know what IAB is? Have you heard of this acronym, IAB? I think it's the Internet Advertising Board, something. It's like a nonprofit group.
Not in common day speech, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a digital advertising technical standard setting body. Talk about jargon. But they did good work. And they essentially announced an agentic roadmap, which is basically, here are sort of reference architecture recommendations for everybody in the ad tech and the MarTech industry on how to go towards agentic commerce. And I was looking at it, was like super technical. I went through the doc like for 20, 30 minutes. It's on their website, IAB Tech, I think. And I was like, there's so much momentum for AI and agentic stuff. And at the same time, over the holidays, I also listened to a podcast by Rory Sutherland. Have you heard of that name? Have you come across? Okay, so Rory is, I think, sort of a leader at Ogilvy, if I'm not wrong. And he's also the author behind this book, Alchemy. You should read that book, by the way. It's fantastic. And he was on the Knowledge Project podcast. And I'm going to play this for you because I think it's pretty amazing what he said about agents and AI, and then we can just have a discussion about this. So this is that podcast. If you're watching on video, you should go check out the Knowledge Project podcast, and this is specifically Rory's episode. And I'm just going to hit play here, and let's talk about it after.
The whole question of the decision science is I think, at the moment, completely critical. And actually, by the way, it'll be very, very interesting with AI. Because I keep hearing people saying, you will say to your AI, find me a skiing holiday, and it will provide you with the perfect skiing holiday. And I keep saying, people don't decide like that. At the very least, you'll have to show them 3 or 4 or 5 skiing holidays from which they choose. Because we can't really choose in the absence of comparison. You see what I mean? It's a sort of freakish element of free market capitalism, which is we can only like something if we choose it in preference to something else. That's interesting.
All right. So I thought that was actually just a very short snippet, but that point about single shot AI commerce or agentic commerce, where you say, like he said, I want a skiing holiday, and it just books the whole thing for you, versus it gives you a menu of options. Hey, guess what? That's what the current paradigm does for you, and it's just a better way of coming up with those choices. What's your take on all of this? And do you think that agentic commerce is really going to take off the way people describe, like, you'll just have agents buying everything for you?
I don't know. I'm not convinced, because I think a big part of the buying experience is the actual discovery of items and products. Like this happened a while back when Amazon actually first started taking over, which was to say people craved going back into a store because discovery was lacking on Amazon. You could find some, it's great if you know exactly what you want, you can one shot it. But a lot of the times you don't know what you want and you actually want to explore. So, the idea of having agents outsource the exploration, the creativity part of shopping is hard. I think for people who know what they want or don't like shopping or are looking for specific items, yes. A great example, actually, I've had this come up is I was doing a house project and I knew I needed a part for something. I had no idea what it was called. I had no idea where
Right.
to find it. I had no idea like how to install it and what was good or bad. It's like this little L bracket. Now, tradesmen would have known and they could have one shot it by going to Home Depot. To me, that's the paradigm that I see happening is for things where you don't know and you don't care, sure, totally buy it. But for the things that you know and care about, there's no world in which I would trust AI to do a better job than me. But Roy makes a great point, which I think even if you don't trust someone to do as good a job as you might trust them to come up with the 5 options that then allow you to choose. And I think like vacations is a good idea. You can even imagine like running shoe types for your half marathon. You might have strong preferences about what feels good and what you've ran in the past. You're not going to let it one shot a shoe for you, but it might come up with the 5 best options and then you can kind of use your preference. And this is like the funny part that I think Rory is exploring, which is like there's not really a right answer. All of human choice is preference. So, yeah, I do believe that leaning into a preference based buying system makes sense. And for what it's worth, not to make this about B2B sales, it is about B2B sales. Like you never just go and buy one tool. You almost
Yeah.
always look at multiple tools. And that's because you want to get a comparison of what is good versus bad. Again, and unless you're an expert in a field, for example, if I'm a CMO and I've worked with 5 different attribution companies and I know the exact attribution company I want to work with because of past experience, I don't need ChatGPT to go do research for me. Um,
Yep.
so experience, wisdom, preferences all play into this. What's your take?
No, I completely agree, and I think this utopian idea of single shot, like agents will do all your buying and selling, just feels hyperbolic to me. I think it's going to be part of the equation for some type of purchases, but a majority of purchases are still going to require choice and selection and preference and research on the part of human beings. You can argue that maybe I also had really deep discussions about AI and singularity and all that fun stuff over the holidays with my brother-in-law, and we were talking about, well, what happens when there's true AGI and we've reached singularity where these robots and this AI can just do everything and they're super intelligent, they're more intelligent than human beings, and in that world, if that thing is implanted in my brain and it knows my preferences automatically without me having to express them, then we're talking about a different paradigm where single shotting may be a thing, where there's a virtual representation of Pranav. But now we're talking sci-fi that doesn't exist, and I don't think it's in the cards for the next like 10, 15 years. I could be wrong, but that's my take after reading all this stuff around AI.
Amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. It's going to be a wild year, that's for sure. But again, like I don't mean to make this about B2B sales, but I'm increasingly seeing people buying technology from GPT. So I think the uncovered part of this story is not just buying preferences for, personal shopping, but buying preference for huge hundreds of thousands, if not multi-million dollar contracts. Like I won't disclose the name of this company, but like I worked with a company recently that bought a tool literally because GPT told them to. It's like a bunch of 24-year-olds who've never bought technology before. And hey, I don't blame them. They're trying to move fast. In the absence of other data and people, they're going to make choices based on internet research. And it frankly does a pretty good job of researching. And like we talked about, if the goal is just to pick a good enough vendor and move quickly, then why have 5 vendor conversations and do all this analysis when GPT or Claude can do a pretty good summarization and get you close enough to make a decision quite quickly?
I do agree with you. So we had this experience at Paramark in December, I think early December. Somebody found us through ChatGPT. This is a public company in Southeast Asia. And so we can see in our, refer code as ChatGPT, and they book a demo and they also send us a request to enter the RFP. This is a public company, and they found us through ChatGPT, and they're asking us to do an RFP. So there's an interesting dynamic here, which is they still want to do the human evaluation, but there's definitely some discovery happening through ChatGPT, and I'm sure they did a little bit of pre-work to whittle down the list. But it was fascinating, right? It's like, and we went through the whole RFP process, and we eventually found the right people because it was coming from the procurement team. It was a great experience, and we'll see if that happens. But it's very real that people are using ChatGPT and Gemini for doing all of their research. Like my usage is off the charts these days.
The irony is like they're using LLM models to create the RFP and you're using LLM models to answer the RFP. So nobody's really doing work anymore.
Oh my God. We definitely tailor all of our RFP responses to like doing our own research
Oh,
because there's
sure.
so much context that's not publicly available still for brands. And
For sure.
we have to look at all the history. But I mean, it's definitely accelerating all of the processes and compressing the time window from like you making a decision that you're going to go make a buying make a purchase in this category to eventually doing it.
All the,
So
all
that's interesting.
all the times I've done an RFP, for what it's worth, like 2/3 is admin bullshit, and 1/3 is like a realistic understanding of the business and the people behind it. So I think like the 2/3 part is going to go away and just become automated on both sides of the equation. And what you're left with is a really clear and intellectual picture of the business and its needs.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to talk about this new report that came out. This is hot off the presses, like literally yesterday. I don't know if you've heard of Carrie Lou, but she
Yeah.
was the. Oh, okay, cool. So she for people who are listening in, Carrie Lou was the ex head of marketing or head of growth or I think head of CMO at Atlassian, I think, and helped to take them public. Am I getting that wrong? Was it Atlassian?
I don't
Now
know.
I'm like, I got to look that up. But she partnered with Ray Reich at this company called Benchmarkit and John Miller of the Marketo fame and Bill from Slack and Zendesk. So these are all sort of former CMOs who do this benchmarking report. I'm generally not a big fan of benchmarking reports, but this was a 168 person survey, B2B CMOs. And there's some really interesting data in here about how people perceive the role of demand versus brand. I know brand is like top of mind for everybody. And I thought this chart was really interesting is how people are thinking about allocating budget. So you can see still quite a bit on the demand generation side and, a minority going towards the brand side. But then what I found really interesting is if you look at the key sort of blocker, uh, always comes back to measurement. So if only 28% of companies have confidence in directly tying brand investment to pipeline, and this is specific to B2B, but I would imagine it's the same in B2C. Very few people are actually able to tie brand investments to sales or to pipeline, and that's the real issue that's preventing people from investing more in brand because it's so easy to just um, invest in areas that are easier to measure. So I thought this report was really interesting. If you don't know of Carolou or Benchmarkit, go follow her on LinkedIn. Go get access to this report. But any reactions, like looking at these charts, Austin? I mean, it's intuitive to me. I don't think there's any surprises here. But what's your take?
I mean, you probably have a really clear perspective given that you are working with so many brands who are making these choices. I'm frankly not surprised by this at all. Everybody who's been in a marketing leadership role knows that the reason why you don't overinvest in brand is not because you don't believe in it. It's because you don't want to get fired by your co-founder or by your leader, right? Like that's the number one thing holding marketers back often is that there is a real inability to track a lot of brand campaigns. And also I think in addition to not being able to track it, they take a long time. Like people don't understand if you want to be a well-recognized and loved brand, that takes years of investment. So any dollar you invest today might not, change somebody's mind or help them be aware of you for 2 or 3 years. And so how do you actually make that analysis? I also just currently believe that with the decline in the measurability of standard deterministic methods and the increase in both probabilistic methods and the increase in other forms of kind of advanced attribution, which you could probably talk about all day, like I believe there'll be a growing desire to go back to the basics, which will include brand marketing and also just like campaign-based marketing, saying, okay, well, we spent X dollars across a wide variety of mediums and channels, and now let's go out and survey and see if we made any impact. Yeah, I don't know. I just remember one company I worked for maybe 4 years ago. w- You know, there was a person in the organization who was very data driven, and it led us to not making any investment in brand. And then
Oh,
eventually we ran out of deterministic channels and started spending a lot of money on brand, and it seemed to be working, but there was no way to really deterministically say that it was working. But when you looked at where all of our money was going, it was really clear. So this gets back to this idea that we've talked about on previous episodes of this podcast, which is like sometimes people use data to tell the story, where I think in marketing you should actually lead with the story and use the data to back up your gut. It's not all science as much as I would like to believe that marketing.
completely agree. Completely agree. And even when you think about science, it always starts with the hypothesis, right? You've got
Yes,
to have a
story.
strongly formed
Exactly.
hypothesis.
An hypothesis is the story. What do you see?
Exactly.
What do you feel? What have you seen? I mean, you work with way more marketers than I. What are you seeing in terms of spend?
Oh man, I mean, I can say with very high confidence, every single B2B brand is and B2C brand is continuously thinking about diversifying from these bottom of funnel channels. And even in the bottom of funnel channels, they're aggressively going after campaigns and mechanisms that expand their reach and frequency. So very much in the brand bucket, right? So we have this company in the healthcare space. So they sell. It's a direct to consumer company. So they sell health products to consumers, and they ran this experiment where they changed the optimization goal of their Meta campaigns from sort of conversions that are direct response conversions to just awareness and reach and frequency type of goals.
Mhm.
And that had a massive impact on their ability to scale their business and their advertising, right? So essentially what they're saying to Meta is, hey, and they didn't do this unilaterally. They had some campaigns that are still sort of focused on bottom of the funnel conversion, but they started launching new campaigns that are pure, get me as many eyeballs as I can within my definition of the target audience. And that did really, really well for them. So I think more and more brands need to do that. And I heard this from actually a media buying friend on the B2B side who was telling me that they're doing the same thing for B2B brands on Meta. Can you believe this? Right. So like my bias of Meta is like Meta doesn't have good, firmographic data. So how would it know that these are marketing professionals that I want to sort of target? And what he was saying is, don't worry about that anymore. What you do is you look at, are there interest or other type of meta native capabilities in terms of targeting. So you can say that they're generally technologists or they're generally following marketing type of pages, right? Things of that nature. And
Mhm.
then let the creative do its job after that rather than hyper targeting based on lists and so on and so forth. Obviously I haven't tested this myself. We are maybe going to do some meta testing later this year, but the momentum for sort of more brand type of campaigns across every channel is on the rise. I expect to see a significant increase there.
Yeah. What's funny is it reminds me of I heard somewhere on LinkedIn yesterday that Meta has a new proposition where instead of providing them, information about who to target and then them finding lookalikes, you actually provide the creative and they create the audience for you. And I just like my first reaction was like, wow, that's convenient.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So on that note, actually, Reddit launched something new, and I think it's actually kind of cool. So we're gonna test out some Reddit stuff as well. They launched Max campaigns. Now everyone's seen these, performance Max campaigns from Google. Meta has Advantage, and so on and so forth. So Reddit's version of this is a little bit interesting. If you are a Reddit advertiser, what you would do in the past is you would go find the subreddits that you want to advertise against, right? So if you're marketing to marketers, or let's pick a different example, right? I'm marketing to healthcare professionals. Then I would go to all healthcare type of subreddits and put advertisements there, right? But there's a lot of subreddits. There's a lot of niche communities out there. And so what this Reddit Max campaign does is it will automatically predict the value or the connection between your campaigns and any and all subreddits automatically. So you're
Wow.
letting Reddit choose which subreddits to go after rather than you making a deterministic choice about these are the subreddits I want to show up against. Now, it's good in theory. We'll find out how it is in practice, but um, on that point about trying to let the black box do most of it, it seems like that's happening on Reddit too now.
Yeah, I don't trust any of these people.
Okay, there we go.
I mean, like, I know you have to, right? Like, especially if you're an early stage startup and you want to use these out-of-box solutions, that's sometimes the only way to deploy capital. But, you've seen how big organizations work. Like, the chances of any of these products working like they're intended is close to 0%. And the chances of them working in a way that benefits the advertiser is probably 100%.
Yeah, it's interesting. I sit on both sides of this debate because I think there is always benefit for the marketer, for the media buyer to have more tools at their fingertips because it's a lot of work to do this, detailed work. And I also agree with you that sometimes these large ad platforms don't actually invest enough time and energy in getting it right. And that's, because it's very easy to make money when you're sitting on top of these ad platforms. And so, yeah, let's leave it at that. And on that on that point, Super Bowl is coming up. There's a lot of advertising that's going to happen, and I came across an interesting campaign, which I'm going to talk about now. Let's. Do you know about this organization called Avocados from Mexico? Have you heard of this?
I've seen the commercials and I know the jingle by heart.
Oh, wow. Okay. I had not heard about this, so I just came across
Live
this.
in California. Yeah,
Um,
they always have the little avocados from Mexico, the little jingle.
I'm sure it's in my brain somewhere, but
Oh, yeah.
I did some research
We're gonna
because
show it, right? No, we're not going to show it.
we can try to find it. The reason I brought this up is there's an interesting campaign. What they've done, and for people who are listening, Avocados for Mexico is a nonprofit group that's a collection of all farmers and farming companies from Mexico who sell avocados into the U.S. And they do advertising to encourage, and foster sort of demand for avocados. And so really interesting. It's kind of like the Got Milk campaign from the 80s, right? They're going after that whole sort of encouraging sort of more avocados. And so this campaign is really cool. I can put in my name and I'm going to go ahead and do this. If you're watching on video, this is called guacguru.avocadosfrommexico.com. And this is all for football fans. You put in your name, you put in your team, and you want to maybe see a prediction of touchdowns, and it automatically looks up the.
I'm tuning in with the guac, my
There we go.
friend. This prediction is coming with extra jalapenos today. After I give you a prediction, I'll give you a guac recipe. Stick around. Guac is always a good play.
And this is all AI, by the way, apparently.
All right, here we go. You want to know how many touchdowns San Francisco will score? I predict San Francisco will score 2 touchdowns. And if you're going for San Francisco, that calls for a Southwestern guacamole recipe. Still 3 more days until the game, but you can always share the results right now for a chance to win a year's supply of avocados. That's a lot of delicious predictions. Football and guac, so predictably good.
So you could tell that there were some pre-recorded parts and there are some AI parts, but it just bleeds in very naturally and it's dynamic based on like what you enter. I thought it was very nicely done, and they're building up a large like Super Bowl campaign, but yeah, I think stuff like this is gonna be interesting, you know, in 2026 as like an example of a nice brand campaign that has engagement and what have you. But I'm curious what you think about this campaign or this stunt.
Do you remember, like, I don't know, 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago, at the very early onset of voice manipulation, there were these campaigns that I think actually the co-founder of Reddit, Alexis Ohanian, was part of, where like they recorded his voice and then they sent like 1,000 different custom messages by email to all these people for something. And it was just like him, you know, he recorded his voice a little bit, but then they created all these variants of him saying the same message. And there was a tool or technology that did that. And for a while, you could record little clips, but it was only really altering the person's name. It was like this roughly the same message. And like the innovation was, hey, you record your voice once and it creates like 1,000 copies of you saying something to unique people. And that's what this feels like. It's like, it feels like so 3 years old. You know, like, oh, the clever part is that you added a random prediction, which for all we know could just be complete bullshit, like a random number generator. And then you added a recipe. So I don't know. Like, I feel like they could have been way more clever. Like, if they wanted to, they should have added the person's name. They should have had you add your LinkedIn or social profile. They should have gone and like gotten your last tweet or your last LinkedIn post and like, they could have done so much more to make it personable. And that would have, the whole point of that would then be like, make it funny so that people then post it on social and create a viral loop. This alone is interesting, but I'm like, am I going to share this? No, it's just like a dumb, I guess if they had made like a wild and ridiculous guac recipe, like, Pranav, here's like your custom guac recipe, and it's just ludicrous, that could have been the play. But again, I think the intention is for this thing to be shared, and they're not really doing anything memorable other than quote unquote using AI. And we've talked about this before, like people using AI for the novelty of it rather than actually doing something cool.
Very good point. And I completely agree. I was like, I watched this right before the show just to prepare for this. And I was like, the concept and the idea is good, but the execution kind of faltered for the reasons that you just talked about. Like, I'm not going to go and share this out because, like, what's the point?
Yeah, embarrassing.
I do wonder,
like,
I do wonder, like, because they didn't even use the name, they didn't personalize any sort of assets that are shareable. And I do wonder if they could have partnered with a Kalshi or a Polymarket or, you know, FanDuel or whatever. And then that makes it like, okay, you can actually do something with this in your FanDuel account and get like extra avocado points or like some, you know, stuff like that.
Or like the winner
that could be quite powerful.
Box of avocados, like do something cool. I don't know.
All right. Okay. All right. I have a couple of other like very quick ones, and then I want to get into a rapid fire on 2026 predictions. We could do some predictions. I think that would be fun.
Oh,
and
yeah,
we can grade our work.
Before you get to next ones, I just wanted to ask real quick, because it's one on our agenda, but it came up yesterday. Did you hear the news about AppsFlyer passing 500 million in ARR?
Oh, wow. No, I did not catch that news. That's massive.
Well, I mean, you probably come across AppsFlyer a lot for any B2C brands that you work with. They're an attribution and deep linking company. They've been around since like the start of it. I think maybe 2013, 2012.
Yeah. Yeah, they're big.
There's also speculation that they're going to get acquired for 3 or 4 billion by this PE firm. So my question, you know, I think maybe the announcement on ARR is to like go hand in hand with the private equity. But what I found so interesting about it is like they're a private company. I think they make, what was Braze's ARR last year? Braze ARR last year. Okay, they barely made less than Braze up until last year. They're certainly making Amplitude. The reason I bring this all up is because there were like a variety of marketing technology tools circa 2015. And I think with all of them, I never predicted that they would get close to $1 billion. Certainly not the attribution space, because, you know, it's like such a narrow piece of technology. But here they are. I mean, as big as Braze in terms of actual, you know, financial revenue, but maybe a different outcome. They're going to get acquired instead of IPOing.
It's actually very impressive because I never thought of AppsFlyer as big as what you just mentioned, right? I thought that they were... Yeah, that's massive. And I think what I have realized after doing this for like 3 years with Paramark is when you look at there's a lot of goodness in incrementality and probabilistic models and all that fun stuff. I obviously that's why we started the company. But there's also a very clear need for what I call real-time reporting. And there's this built-in desire for every marketer, for every growth professional to show up on Monday, open my dashboard, hit refresh, and see what happened in the last day, in the last 7 days, in the last month, in this. And that's a habit that I don't think is ever going to go away. And what AppsFlyer and Braze and all of these companies do is make that really, really easy. And I think there's a massive market there. The challenge for them is, where do you go from here? And a lot of those, every one of our mobile customers who are primarily sort of doing business on mobile have one of these technologies implemented, but they will layer on, probabilistic stuff on top of it, because at some point the value of these deterministic platforms starts to plateau. So I do think that there'll be consolidation over time. And the challenge is that there's nobody to consolidate into, really, because when you think about the whole landscape, who's bigger than Braze or, AppsFlyer or Branch or any of these companies? There isn't one, right? Are you going to get acquired by Nielsen, which is also private equity owned? No. I don't know that would make sense. Maybe the Nielsen ownership is going to try and do something like that, but there just hasn't been a household brand in this space that can bring all of these pieces together and make something more out of it. And that's my take on what's going on.
Even Adobe, but
brutal.
Twilio, they fumbled the ball. They bought they bought SendGrid and they bought Segment. Twilio could have done it. I don't know what happened though.
That's a very good point. Twilio could have done it, and they just haven't. So
acquisition and mergers are hard, man. If that's the lesson, it's that acquiring technology and putting pieces together is hard. Building technology is hard. Acquiring technology is also hard.
Yeah. So I think what will end up happening is, and I don't know what the split of the AppsFlyer customer base is, right? How much of it is SMB indie developers versus, mid-market and enterprise. And that's something that will give you a sense of what the future might be. I think you will end up having it more and more enterprise, where enterprises use that type of tech for sort of the foundational data collection, and they're not actually using it for the true sort of attribution decision making on top of it. You see what I'm saying? So they're using it for the event stream rather than anything else, and then you're competing between the segments and the AppsFlyers and the branches and what have you. And some people will just use Braze for all of it rather than have 2 or 3 different solutions. And eventually, really long term, we will absolutely get into that space. But we have a lot to accomplish before we get there.
Yep.
All right.
It was a good tangent, though. Let's get back on it.
Yeah. So, a couple of other interesting pieces of news. PayPal is becoming a closed loop media network. We talked a little bit about sort of Amex launching ads a couple of episodes ago, just on their properties. But what this is implying is that PayPal's taking their transaction data and essentially saying that if you're a PayPal merchant, you can use PayPal's transaction data and use that as a targeting mechanism on their media network, which would be whether it's Meta, whether it's TikTok, whether it's, Amazon, whether it's whatever other supply side platforms that they connect into. And if I'm a merchant who uses PayPal, I can say, PayPal, I want you to advertise to all the people who transact through PayPal on those networks. So using it as a targeting mechanism, and then you can see whether they converted through PayPal. So it's a closed loop sort of mechanism. And we're seeing these payment companies become ad media networks, which is really interesting. And I'm pretty sure Stripe will do something similar. They'll have an ad product at some point. But interesting development. And I'm curious what you think. Obviously, lots of Amazon already does this, I think, with their DSP and what have you.
Oh my gosh. I'm also not surprised by this. There's an amazing article by Ben Thompson at Stratacherry.
Yeah, yeah.
Am I pronouncing that right? Stratacherry?
I'm always confused about if it's stratechery or stratechery or I don't know.
We got to ask Ben. I'm mutilating it, but I'm going to keep calling it Stratacherry because I thought it was strategy with Sherry, but I'm probably wrong. But he talks about this like probably 6 years ago. He's like platforms in an aggregator world. He talks about the ability of platforms to control with advertising, and this follows a very similar trend where you create the platform and then you can control the advertising dollars. And so I'm frankly not surprised. The question will be like, how successful is it?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think other folks that compete with PayPal in the commerce space are going to start doing the same thing, right? Could you imagine a Toast or a Square or other payment companies do the exact same thing, right? Adyen, and everybody's essentially using their first party data to do better and better targeting across their respective media networks. So advertising is going to change quite a bit in the next couple of years as these things evolve. Okay. I think it's time to move into 2026 predictions. So I noted down some 3 questions for you, Austin, and I want you to give your prediction. I want to give my own prediction, and let's add more questions at the end of that if you have interesting angles. So first one, it's kind of relevant to what we were talking about earlier. What percentage of the buyer journey, both B2B and B2C, will be handled by AI or agents by the end of 2026? There's no way to know the truth of this, but if you had to say 10%, 20%, 50% of the buyer journey, all the way from research to like fully, making a purchase and getting the product, how much of that do you think will be handled by AI agents versus like humans or what have you?
We're talking B2C, right?
We could talk about B2C and B2B separately.
Yeah, let's do separately. I'm just going to say, I'm going to do coin flip, 50% for B2C. And the reason I say that is because, finding things, researching things, collating things is maybe half the buying journey. Getting references, validation, comparison, and waiting for the right price is probably the other half. And I think like in maybe a fraction of cases, you're one-shotting it like we talked about before. And in a fraction of cases, you're just doing 20%. So the average of those two things is maybe around 50%. I think in B2B, it's probably a lot less. It's probably like 25, maybe 30%. And I think it's almost all the research strategy, getting the vendors together. What's not going to go away is help me get a deck with the vendor, help me have a call with the helm vendor, help me engage on pricing with the vendor and do contract negotiations. That's why I say 25 to 30. I think all it really does is help you go from like 0 to call as fast as possible. But as you know, in B2B, you almost always have to talk to a sales rep. So if that would actually be hilarious, build a AI agent that goes and talks to B2B vendors for you.
All right, maybe there's a business idea there. I like those answers.
Yours.
I'm actually on the same boat with you on the B2C side. Like just noticing my own behavior, I think 50% feels very much on point. And on the B2B side, I actually think it's going to be lower. I think it's going to be closer to 10%. And when I say B2B, I mean like things that are not a transactional sale, right? It's not like a $10 a month subscription. I'm talking about things where there's enterprise sort of buying cycles. I think in the enterprise environment, it's going to be closer to 10% than 25 or 30%. I have ideas on how to measure this, so we'll talk about that at the end and how we can hold ourselves accountable at the end of 26. All right, next one. Will all the answer engine optimization or generative engine optimization, will all of that stuff replace SEO as the number one priority for organic growth?
All right, this is a hot take. I just find it's funny, like AEO doesn't feel that different than SEO right now. There was this period of time when generative AI first came out where people were doing the shotgun approach. I was part of it, generate 10,000 articles, they're all shit, but the goal is to get a ton of traffic and eyeballs. And like you get better with each iterative process, but you're creating bulk 50 to 100 articles at a time. and like you're trying to spam the internet and get in as many surface areas as possible so that you get traffic. Quality is low, volume is high. And then like a bunch of us, myself included, realizes like, oh, well, the traffic we're getting is like pretty shitty and LLMs have improved. So we have to go back and rewrite all these things. And so what I've seen a lot of marketing teams do is now what they're calling AEO, but it's just like a slightly faster version of SEO. It's like we're producing 3 articles a week. I'm like, you could have just hired 2 content writers. And like you have AirOps, which is costing you 20 grand. So you're doing like what 3 content writers could have done for 20 grand as opposed to 300 grand. Is that AEO or is that just like, hypercharged SEO? So I don't think we're quite at the level yet where like a business like yours could go and give 50 to 100 keywords and produce 10,000 world-class articles in the course of like 2 months. I think you either have to choose a path, really low quality or really high quality and reduce speed. Right now, people are gravitating towards like reduce higher quality and reduce speed because they don't really want to have AI slop. There's like, we've talked about this in a couple episodes, there's retaliation against brands and companies that are perceived as like abusing AI. So people are taking a more slow approach. So my prediction is actually like the speed just gets faster. This is all really SEO. It's just how fast you produce content increases. That's all it is.
Totally with you. I agree with everything that you've said. But if I were to be a betting man, and I'm not, at the end of 2026, if I were to ask like 100, marketing leaders, has your GEO, AEO stuff replaced SEO as the number one priority? I bet 90% will say yes, even if the underlying stuff is the same. But
Sure.
the perception and the branding of the thing is like.
So that's the answer from the CMO. What do you think the answer is from the marketing manager?
They'll just laugh me out of the room. It's like, it's the same shit, man. Like you said.
They're like, my CMO doesn't fucking know what these 2 things are.
Oh my God. All right. We're not going to edit that out. No harm meant to CMOs. We love you.
What about call sheet bet? Does my CMO, well, first the question is like, does my CMO believe that AEO replaces SEO? And the next bet is, does my CMO even know what SEO is?
Good one. All right. Last one from my bank here. What percentage of the creative workflow will be driven by AI?
I feel like I'm still struggling with this. I actually really want to get your opinion because the reason I'm having trouble predicting it is because I look on LinkedIn as the closest proxy to what other people are doing. And it feels to me like everybody is doing everything in marketing with no resources. But then when I airdrop into a real organization that has 3, 4, 5 people, they can barely manage 4 or 5 channels. So there's this disparity between, okay, I read, see, and hear online that marketing is being fully replaced by AI for creative workflows. But then the practical reality when I look at people using Claude and GPT and Gemini is that at best it's making them marginally more efficient. And the rule of 3, which I've always adhered to, is that especially in like a pre-Series C startup, a marketer can at most manage 3 channels. It's making them marginally more efficient. It's not really changing their ability to do 10 channels. I haven't seen a startup where a founder and a marketer together are managing 10 channels and telling me, yeah, it's the easiest thing in the world. We just set it and forget it. And like our lives are happy and fun. There's always this problem like, well, a bunch of our channels don't work, or we're overwhelmed, or we don't have enough people, or, the output isn't right, or we're compromising on quality. Like there's always problems. But I talked to plenty of brands who are only doing 3 channels and doing really well. And their question is, well, how do we do more? We feel like we're falling behind with AI. So my prediction is like, I think the creative workflow, when I kind of separate it, it's all the administrative work of the creative workflow, I think can be fully replaced by AI. But will people actually be able to do it? I'm not so sure. So I don't know. Again, I'm going to do a coin flip. I'm going to do 50%. I know that's cheating, but like, I just don't have great confidence that businesses will really be able to replace the entire creative workflow for different campaigns. And I also think, like, as we're learning, some campaigns are easier to automate, like, for example, content. Other campaigns are much harder, like an out-of-home campaign. What's your take?
Yeah.
You probably work closer to this.
I think the reality is closer to 20 to 30% on average.
Mm.
And so it's lower than where you came in at 50%. That's my bet for 2026. I do think in 2027 there might be a chance that it gets closer to 50 and 60%. And when I say creative workflow, I mean all the way from an idea to a fully launched campaign, right? So an idea, the brief, the creative execution, and then the publishing of the creative and whatever the right channel is, email, ads, in-app, what have you. And the reason I say 20 or 30% is exactly what you said. There's a lot of tool fatigue, and there's no standard. There's no just like you have ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, here is the tool that makes that entire process easy using AI. You still have to cobble together a lot that makes sense for your brand and for your workflow and for your skill sets. It's not standardized. So nobody's built the easy button yet for this whole workflow. And that's why I say 20, 30%. Everyone's using it, but it's like marginal. It's on the sides. But the leap hasn't happened to take it all the way from idea to launch in a fully sort of agentic AI driven way. It just hasn't happened.
And what's funny is now that you just said that, it reminded me of some work I did with a very large public company in the last year. And we've talked about this, where this idea of the total marketing platform, which has a lot of different definitions, but in this particular case, it was actually trying to build what you described, which is to say, hey, we have 15 different tools. We're not going to build an agent that can go out and on day one automate all these tools. What we are going to build is this idea of a campaign object with effectively an LLM and a context database and an actual hard database underneath. And so when you create a campaign, you talk to an agent and it will suggest the things that you have to do, the steps that you have to take, and it will create a checklist for you that you can work through. Now, for small companies, that checklist is not very hard and that might not be valuable. But you can imagine for a very large company, call it like Walmart, where a marketing manager has 15 different approval steps to get through. They have to get it, compliant with legal. They have to go through privacy. They have to talk to lawyers. They have to check for existing creative before they create something. They create something in Figma, but it might have to be redesigned for the tool that they're sending. Having a single place where you do all that work, and then also knowledge about, okay, well, here are the 7 tools that you have to go into and do X in. That alone is that's a huge value add. That to me is actually more than 50% of the launch campaign. Because if you think about it, there's like the creative work, the
Yep.
execution work and approval work, and then the final publish work. In startups, those all blend into one. But in really
Fair
large
point.
companies, the ideation is not the hard part. It's the approvals part, the
Yeah.
compliance part.
Yeah.
So actually, I mean, if anybody out there was looking for a cool business to build some type of campaign modifier, campaign agent, whose only job it is to keep marketers organized in the growing plethora of tools that a large company uses. And if you create something like that, call me up and I will help you find investors.
All right. What a call to action to end on. So everybody who's listening in, go check out gtmn.fm. If you're not subscribed to the Substack, you should. You'll get a weekly recap of this conversation, plus a summary, plus obviously the YouTube link. We are on YouTube, we're on Spotify. Go check us out, subscribe, follow, rate us, give us 5 stars if you enjoy this. I've heard from many people over the holidays that this is one of their favorite shows. So thank you for listening in. Austin, this was a lot of fun. First episode for the year, and I'll see you again next week.
See you again next week, man. This was a huge pleasure.